British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned as the leader of the Conservative Party and is due to step down as the Prime Minister soon. It comes after the resignation of over 40 of his MPs. I think that figure is actually up to 50. And that signaled no confidence in his leadership. Johnson has followed many scandals, or has been followed by many scandals during his tenure that have clouded his reputation and ultimately led to him being asked, or forced, some might argue, to resign. Let's get some analysis on the political future that he's facing and perhaps the potential successor that may have to step into the breach. Bring in Stephen Gruzd from the South African Institute of International Affairs. It's great to have you on the program, Stephen. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Let me start by just getting your thoughts on whether or not Boris Johnson had any other option here, despite perhaps what people might argue around whether he voluntarily stepped down or was essentially pushed out.
Thank you, and good morning. I don't think he chose to step down of his own accord. He was definitely forced to do so by his party. He's been clinging on to power for the last few months as these scandals that you mentioned have mounted, and really up until the last minute was defiant and saying that he wanted to stay on as Conservative Party leader. But the pressure of these resignations grew and grew as more and more senior figures left the government and cited as their reasons him and his leadership style. So he was pushed to the edge and then was pushed over.
What's interesting, of course, about even Boris Johnson rising to the position of Prime Minister is that these scandals have always been known. I mean, Boris Johnson's personal life and his political decisions have really raised eyebrows from the beginning. I wonder where this leaves the Conservative Party, at least in the eyes of the ordinary public, in a context where people have always criticized the decision of appointing Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
Yes, I mean, he has an enigmatic personality. He's very magnetic. He's a populist, and he attracts the media, and he likes the media. I'm not sure they like him so much these days. But it does put... The fact is he was elected in quite a landslide in 2019, taking over, of course, from Theresa May. So there's been this series of short prime ministerships for the Conservative parties after David Cameron's resignation over Brexit. And a lot of Theresa May's tenure was about Brexit, and Johnson campaigned on getting Brexit done. That was what he was going to do, and for all his criticisms, he did that. He did deliver Brexit from the European Union to the British voters. Now the party needs to select a new leader, and there's a field of about 10 names that have been mentioned, probably none of them very familiar to us who don't follow British politics all that closely, but there is going to be a very vigorous leadership contest within the Conservative Party.
And one wonders, given just how many unresolved issues there are, to what extent taking up this position is just drinking a poisoned chalice.
Yes, there are fundamental problems in the UK. They're still dealing with the after effects of COVID. The cost of living is rising, as it is everywhere in the world, fueled by the fuel problems engendered by the Ukraine conflict. So there are massive domestic problems, migration issues, and whoever takes over, indeed, is going to have a huge challenge. It's not an ideal environment in which to come into office.
Speaking about the cost of living crisis, part of what I've been able to hear is that people in the UK care more about solving that issue than what's going on in politics, especially what's going on within the Conservative Party. To what extent do those ordinary individuals have a say in who's elected as Johnson's successor?
So there's an interesting process that's going to happen. MPs or other leadership candidates will put themselves forward and will be voted on by the caucus of the Conservatives inside the Houses of Parliament. And that number will be reduced gradually until, as the people lose votes, there'll be fewer and fewer candidates. And when it gets to 2, it then switches to the paid-up members of the Conservative Party who will vote for the new leader by a postal vote. And the number of paid-up Conservative Party members is around about 180,000 in a country of over 60 million. So it's not just a handful of MPs that will be picking, but it is a very small electorate, relatively, who will be making the decision of who the next Tory leader is, and by default, the next Prime Minister. That is if Johnson is able to stay on.
Right.
Maybe the pressure on him to resign as Prime Minister will, as Prime Minister will mount, and things may change, and maybe Britain might be headed for an early election.
In fact, that's exactly where I was hoping we'd go. Already some of his now former cabinet colleagues have said that he's got a magnetic field of chaos around him, and keeping him around any longer won't be in the best interest of the country. Under what circumstances can he essentially not even be allowed to be caretaker Prime Minister?
I think it's going to have to come from his own party, and I'm not sure what the rules are for ousting him from number 10 Downing Street will be. But yes, there are a lot of grumblings and mumblings in the party that, you know, if he's not good enough to be leader of the party, he's certainly not fit to be Prime Minister of the country. So we'll have to see in the coming days what might happen. There may be a vote of no confidence in him. I know the Labour Party has said that they would trigger one if the Conservatives don't do something like that. And then his premiership could be over pretty soon after that.
That vote of no confidence you speak about, we were initially told when he survived the one this year that he'd essentially be insulated from something like this for, I think, about a year. But this all depends on the rules which are put together by the 1922 committee. What do you know about what that body and the powers they have now, given this resolution?
So it's a body of backbenchers, not ministers as such, but sort of ordinary members of the party. Indeed, he would be insulated from a leadership challenge within the Conservative Party. But if this goes to Parliament and a majority of MPs across parties have a vote of no confidence in him, that would, in all likelihood, trigger his resignation as Prime Minister and trigger a general election. And that's something that the Conservatives want to avoid, even though he won quite handsomely in the last election. In this tumultuous political environment, they would not be keen on losing power after 12 years in number 10 Downing Street.
Not that we were short of more turbulence in global politics, given what's already happening, but how worried should we be about the kind of instability this will bring at that level?
I don't think we should be too worried. Certainly in terms of South Africa-UK relations, they remain strong, and they have survived many different prime ministers and presidents on the South African side. I think it's a pity because Johnson, for all his eccentricities, had a very good relationship with President Ramaphosa. But and geopolitically, I don't think there would be major changes in British foreign policy. I would predict that they would still be very supportive of Ukraine, and that they would continue their commitment to helping Ukraine defend itself from Russia. So I don't see major political ructions, but of course, when leadership changes, the focus is internal, and the focus on international affairs is thereby reduced. So I wouldn't see many changes in the South African-UK relationship, no matter who occupies 10 Downing Street. But yes, there will be a period of Britain looking inward rather than looking outward.
Something that is unlikely to really have a radical impact on the foreign policy direction of the UK. Stephen Gruzd, thanks very much indeed for always giving us your perspective, helping us connect the dots from the Southern Hemisphere here. Really appreciate your time. Stephen is with the South African Institute of International Affairs.